Welcome to the Geeky Things Podcast, Episode 2. I wanted to find out what it was like working as a games writer and was fortunate to meet with Eliot Fish, a veteran in the field. You might be more familiar with his work as a series producer on Good Game, GGSP, and now ABC Gamer, but if like me, you grew up in the 90s, you might be more familiar with his work as an editor for a popular gaming magazine called Hyper from 1999 to 2004. I was feeling nostalgic and decided to try something a little different. Please enjoy. It was getting dark, and a mage weary from his travels finds a cave from respite from the storm. Having been cast out of his village, the mage saw no other choice but to enter. The mage lights a small bonfire for comfort and as a courtesy to those who may dwell within the cave. He unfurls his bindle containing a hodgepodge of scrolls and treats. The mage slumped against the rock, looks at his belongings, sighs, and wonders if he's on the right path. Just then, a grand mage crosses his sights and proceeds to sit down in front of the flame. The older mage appeared refined and carried himself in a distinguished manner. The young mage recognized the older fellow from his studies. The two begin to chatter, and the older mage reveals that he has walked this path before.
I think one of the interesting things is that everyone will have a different pathway. So I can only speak to my experience and what my journey was like. You could probably speak to another 10 professionals and find theirs very different, because some people go the academic route and do journalism degrees and move through that pathway. I didn't. And that's because I was very focused on my music in my early life. And that was my passion. And that's what I was putting all my time into. To work, I was just looking for a job that was somewhat related. And I ended up getting a job as just an office assistant at Smash Hits magazine, which was, one of the early sort of pop music magazines.
99 to 2004, you were at Hyper. To be honest, I didn't always buy them. I just went to the news agency and just flicked through and see if there's anything good in any of the magazines. It was good, I'd take it home.
See, for me, that was Zap 64, a British Commodore 64 magazine. And I used to always get that every time we went to the news agent. That influenced me a lot in my writing. It talked about games with real love and real passion, wrapped up in a lot of humor and a very conversational voice.
You got your big break doing a review on the game called Wizardry. That was in 1993, but I thought the game came out in 1981. So was that like a retrospective review or?
It was, yeah. So it was originally on PC and it was the NES remake early Wizardry game. When I got the chance to do that review, I wasn't working on Hyper. I was working on Rolling Stone magazine, which was in the same publishing house. And I was, I think I was doing sub-editing work. And they started Hyper magazine. And I was just like, oh, this is cool. And I just basically walked into the office of, I think it was Stuart Clark, who was the editor at the time. And I just said, can I help? What can I do? Can I do something? But I mean, I did have a track record of having written reviews, not for games, but for music. Because when I was working for Smash Hits, I was that office assistant where I was just in a position to just watch what everyone else was doing and absorb what actually went into the creation of the magazine. And then from, being exposed at that level, I then got a chance to write a few reviews of some 7-inch singles. And so I was able to get some written copy under my belt and go through the process of go to an editor and an editor come back to me and say, oh, maybe change this, change that, or, see, how the work is taken and evolved to be print ready. So I at least had that experience. So I think Stuart, was like, okay, I can see you've done stuff. You've written reviews. You've had to think critically about a product before. I know you're a big gamer. Great. Okay, take it away and do it. And, I think that was like, what was that, 93, 94, I think that was when that was. I think back then we were lucky in some ways that there were so many steps in the process from first sitting down to write to getting a finished product that you were constantly able to reevaluate the work. And I think now, unless you're working with a team or with others who are going to be challenging you, and, you know, for instance, working in TV on Good Game, where we would write a script and we would sit around and do a table read, and you'd have that sort of critical appraisal of the work happening in real time with people and getting feedback and realizing that something that you wrote that you thought was golden had all these flaws in it for whatever reasons. And, you know, being able to listen to those perspectives and understand that there's a real benefit there to reworking something and reworking something and reworking something until it's
Where you're sick of
done. You know, yeah. You know, I think that's a really valuable way of ending up with something good. You have to be open to criticism, you know, because you do get it's a really valuable perspective that you can gain from others and help you sort of reevaluate your own writing and make it better. And I think part of that also is just like to always be reading or listening or watching the kind of content that you want to be producing. And you develop your own sort of mental data bank of creativity to draw upon. You know, you can't be an empty vessel. You have to kind of like that inspiration, you know, you'll be inspired and influenced by others. And those are the foundations upon which you can build your own voice, you know. And so, you know, you can't sort of just operate in isolation.
So you've worked on other projects. You've done video game soundtracks and short films and theatre projects and things like that. Did these people come and try to find you, or did you approach them, or how did it come about?
Yeah, so like I've been very lucky in that a lot of those opportunities have come to me. And I think, you know, to some degree, it's because I always have said yes to things, you know. Not only has that greatly increased the amount of stuff that I've done, but it's about latching onto those little glimmers of opportunity. And I've been scared of failure, taking things, thinking, oh my God, I'm jumping into the deep end of something that I don't know enough about. But I think if you've got a decent head on your shoulders and you're willing to really listen and really learn, you can tread water until you're swimming, you know? And so I would always just say yes to things, knowing that an opportunity like that just might not come along again. And that was like when I first got offered to go work in TV. I was like, oh God, you know, like, what do I do? And it was just, you know, it was just a case of just learning incrementally on the job. And that's why I think also, like, you know, don't ever set out thinking I'm just going to get that dream job, you know, straight away. Like, it's something to work towards, but you might have to take an entry-level thing that's tangentially associated with that and you move across and, you know, eventually you'll get there. But I think it's really important to say yes. You know, your friends are going to go off into all sorts of different industries, but, you know, there might be one or two that are sort of in fields of work that are associated. So great, you know, that's going to be beneficial. And the people that you meet along the way, you know, like developing a network is really, really important to being exposed to some of those opportunities that are going to come along. You know, you create your own luck in that way. You know, you really increase your chances of getting to work on some cool stuff by getting out there and getting to know people.
The young mage fell asleep, comforted by the possibility of tomorrow. As he woke up the next morning, the Grand Mage was nowhere to be seen. The mage packed his belongings and found an extra scroll in the mix. Transcribed on it was, "So you want to be a Grand Mage," followed by a set of instructions. He decided it was best to save it for later, as he needed to reach the next town before nightfall. As he made his way out of the cave, through the woods and back to the path, the world somehow seemed a little less scary than it did before. Geeky Things, So You Want to Be a Games Writer was recorded by me, Eric Cow. I'd like to thank Eliot Fish for taking the time to speak to me about life, his career, and for the advice on pursuing the path of a games writer. Thanks for playing.